Welcome to the video for the back of the vintage Christmas crochet cushion cover, and we are going to be making basically a granny square today. There's going to be a couple changes in there, so it's not just a typical granny square, because just for whatever reason I decided to throw in a round of single crochet in there to kind of make that center square pop out a little bit more. But other than that, the rest of it is going to be pretty simple, mostly granny square. There's going to be some double crochet rows as well. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. What I did with my original is I mirrored the front with the striping in the back. I'm going to change that up with my new cushion because I just want to see what it looks like. I'm going to start with the color from the outer edge as my center for the pillow in the back, just for giggles. All right, I am going to start with a magic ring again and go under, pull through. And so I am going to be treating my chain 3 as a double crochet in this section of the pillow because it is a granny square and we are creating holes all around it. So it doesn't, the reason I usually don't treat it as a double crochet is because I don't care for the gap that it creates when you slip stitch your last double crochet to this if you're treating it as a first double crochet. So I will typically just use that as nothing more than a filler. But because we're making granny square, I'm going to use it as a double crochet for this whole back. Alrighty, so we have our first double crochet. I'm going to put 2 more. So there's 1 and then here's 2. We are going to be creating clusters of 3 double crochets with spaces of 3 chains. And now do another cluster of 3 double crochet. And then another chain 3. In all, we want to have 4 clusters of 3 double crochets. So do another one. And that's 3. Another chain 3. And then the last of the 4 clusters, we're creating 4 sides and 4 corners right now. 2, 3, and then chain 3. I'm going to pull this in so that it snugs it up and it's making more of a square. And then I'm going to slip stitch to the first double crochet of our row, which is that chain 3. Now with granny squares, I typically will slip stitch over to the next corner because I feel like corners keep the look cleaner. I'm not a fan of the line or jog that happens when you just start a granny square where you ended. So I will slip over, and because I'm not going to be working in these stitches again, typically it doesn't cause any problems later down the road. All right, so I'm in my corner and I chained 3 again. We are going to be putting 3 double crochet clusters and a chain 3 into this space, creating another corner. So 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3, make some space and put another cluster in there. 2 and 3. In between our corner clusters, we are going to be putting a chain 1 that makes space and helps us move across without pulling too tightly. So do 1, 2, and 3, and then chain 3, and do another cluster. And then another chain 1 so that you can move over to the next corner. and then a 3 double crochet cluster, chain 3, a 3 double crochet cluster, 2 and 3, chain 1, and then go ahead and finish up this corner. I'll be right back. All right, so I have finished crocheting in all of my double crochets and my corners around. I'm up to that last chain 1 space before where we started. Go ahead and single into that last chain 1 space and then join with the single crochet where you started. You can go ahead and cut off at this point. And if you want to, you can tuck your color in so that you're not dealing with any little ends. I will say that tucking ends in on granny squares can be a little bit tricky just because, you know, you can't just catch the yarn up in there because there's way too many holes. So I usually try to take the time and carefully weave in my ends when I'm working with a granny square so that none of my ends stick out. Now I am going to be using probably a white or a gray after this as my next color. And I'm going to be joining in the corner space. We're going to be recreating that granny square look off of a straight row. So if it's not something that you've ever done before, it'll be a chance for you to try something new. I'll be right back as soon as I get done tucking in my ends and we'll get a new color attached. All right, all my ends are tucked in and we've got this little square. So I'm going to start in one of my corner chain 3 spaces. I'm going to pull up my next color. We are going to start our granny corner, which is going to be that 3 cluster, chain 3, 3 cluster. So back to double crochets. And then chain 3 again. Excuse me. And 3 double crochet. We are still going to do our chain 1 because it's not just between the corners, it's also the space that is used to create that hole between our 3 double crochet clusters. So, so we are going to skip 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to double crochet into the next 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to chain 1 again, and we're going to skip the last 3, and we're going to do our granny corner. 2 and 3, chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and chain 1 for our space in between. All right, so when we're reestablishing, when we're reestablishing a granny square row onto a straight row, the thing that we want to keep in mind is that we need to have clusters of 3. That's what makes the granny square the granny square. And then with chain 1 spaces, some granny squares will give you chain 2 spaces. The most common though is the chain 1 space. I have a tendency to skip 3 stitches in between because that's essentially what you're doing down here is skipping 3 stitches when you go in between them. So skipping 3, chaining 1, and then double crocheting into 3. That will typically give you what you're looking for as far as establishing a granny square row. Because once we get past this row, we're going to treat this like a regular granny square continuing forward where we're just putting the clusters into the chain 1 spaces in between. All right. So let's go ahead and finish up this beginning row. So I've chained 1. I'm going to skip 3. We're going to double into 3. And chain 1 and skip 3 again. And do our granny corner. I know it looks like it pulls a little bit, but it will loosen up as you get more of these stitches in here. All right, in our chain 1. And skipping 1, 2, 3, and this is my last side, obviously. 2 and 3, and my last chain 1. I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch to the top chain of that original chain 3. And voila, we have ourselves a square. And if it's a little bit rounded or tight, or you feel like it's a little too much, it might be a tension thing. I know my hands are tight today, so I might be pulling a little bit snugger than I normally do. But it should, you know, basically lay as a square. Once we get this on our pillow, you really aren't going to notice any wobbles or anything like that. We are going to do one more row of this color. So what I did is I kind of broke it down. And when I was making this pattern originally, this was all based on scrap yarns. So I just kind of used what I had for as long as I had it. So these colors ran out at this point. That's why I have so much more red on here than I do any other color. I'm going to play around with colors on this sample that we're making today. So you can really just do whatever you want. This is, you know, be inspirational. But for my original, if you want to keep it the same, I did 2 rows of this color and then 2 rows of this color and then 3 rows of granny square stitch in the 4th color. So once again, in order to establish our next granny row, I'm slipping over to the corner, starting in the corner with a chain 3, and then I'm going to finish off my granny square corner with my 2 more double crochets, a chain 3, and 3 double crochets into that corner. And then as we go across, we chain 1, and then in this chain 1 space, this is where we put our next 3 double crochet cluster, and we chain 1 again, put our next cluster in the next chain 1, and we chain 1 again, and then we just continue on like that until we have what we need. I just want to get some color behind this so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. All right, so just continue on with this, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need to have a total of 7 rows after this single crochet. So this is row 2. You're going to want to go 5 more rows exactly as we've done here. And when you add your next color, start in your chain 3 corner like we did down here, except of course it's not going to be a single crochet. But as we started this white section into the corner space, we're going to just keep building on like that, just making sure that our 3 double crochet clusters go into our chain 1 spaces. All right. So if you're new to granny squares, that's for newbies. If you've made 100 of them, then you know what you're doing already. We just need to have a total of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right. I'm going to let you go. I'll come back after I have 7 rounds on here, and we will continue working on the back. All right. I've completed rounds 8 through 10. So 8, 9, and 10 are here. We are going to continue. I'm going to work with the light gray color and bring that in. We're going to be working on these straight rows here. And instead of going into just these chain 1 spaces, we're going to be going into both the double crochets and the chain 1 spaces. You're going to go ahead and start your corner like normal with 3, but I only put 2 in between because I don't want too much space on my corners. So I went 3, 2, 3 for these as opposed to 3, 3, 3. So we're going to go ahead and start working then into the double crochets and the chain 1 spaces going across. And we're going to do actual 2 rows of this particular stitch combination. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up these 2 rows of light gray, and then I'm going to come back and we will talk about size then again. But remember, on corners 3, 2, 3 as opposed to 3, 3, 3. Alrighty, I'll see you in just a little bit. Okay, so I decided to come back after row 1 because we really need to start thinking strategically now about making sure that our stitches match up. Now, this is always based on our gauge, but we do want to also have our stitches match up as much as possible because we are going to be doing a border around this to bring both the front and the back together. So after this, we've got 41 stitches going across each side. So we need to get our stitches so that we're up to 53. So what we're going to do is we're going to decrease our corners, and we're only going to do 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into these corners for this round. And I believe the round's going forward as well, because what that'll do is that'll add 4 stitches per side. And doing that, so that would bring us to 45 in the next row. And then the next row after that is going to bring us to 49. And then the next row after that is going to bring us to 53. So we're going to just change up our corners a little bit here so that we can get our numbers to match up perfectly. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and continue with one more round of this lighter gray. Doing 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in the corners, and then a double into each of the doubles going across. I'll meet you back up over here. I'm going to go ahead and change my color again after this one. Okay, I've gotten my 2 rows of light gray done. I'm going to measure up against my front. You can do it with either side facing, it doesn't really matter. But it looks like I'm going to come up fairly short of where I want to be to make a complete back. So it looks like I could probably use about 2 more rows of double crochet. So I'm going to do 2 more rows just like this. So depending on your gauge, etc., you need to make sure that your sides match up together. So at this point, like, you know, kind of measure where you're at, base it on what size stitching you make. For the most part, you're going to follow the pattern that I provided for you. But I always encourage people to, you know, make it yours, make it your own. And if sizes are different, then change it up if you need to. Leave off a row, add a row, do what you need to do to make sure that your pieces are going to match up and make a nice cushion cover. Okay, so I am personally going to do 2 more rows, and I'm going to go ahead and I might do a row of the blue probably last, and I'm going to do an extra row of white in here just to add some contrast color in between the light gray and this blue. All right, so I'm going to do 1 row of white, just like my last row, where I did 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the corner, because I only want to add 4 stitches per side for the next 2 rows, because we had 41 here. We added 4 stitches with our corners here, so we now have 45. I'm going to add 4 stitches, so that's going to be 49 in the next row. And then the last row that I do, I'm going to add 4 more stitches. That's going to make 53, which matches up with the 53 stitches that I have along here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish that up, and we're going to come back together, and the next video is going to be working on the flap here and putting our pillow pieces together. All right, all the rows are done. I have gone ahead and done the white row and the accent row of that teal color matched up with the stitch count along this edge and this edge. I have 53 stitches going on each of them. And as you can see, I needed to add those 2 extra rows. This gets a little wavy, but the thing is that we're going to stick a pillow in here, so none of that waviness is going to show. And if you flip it over, you can see that, like, I'm not over on the back side. These edges will match up perfectly as we're going around. All right, so this is the back. We're done with that. You can go ahead and tuck in your ends and set that aside, because the next thing that we're going to be working on is the flap going across the top. All right, that will be the next video, so I'll see you then.